Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us to discuss how life sciences organizations are overcoming modern data challenges with cloud adoption, hosted by Hexaware, Snowflake, and IQVIA. My name is James Gardner with Hexaware's Cloud Data Practice, and I'll be your moderator for today. As we move into the agenda for today's session, for today's format, each speaker is going to present their perspective on our agenda topics, starting with Srini Maranganti, VP of Life Sciences and Healthcare here at Hexaware, who's going to be setting the stage with the impact of digital innovation in life sciences. This will be followed by Jesse Cugliotta, Industry Principal, Life Sciences and Healthcare at Snowflake, giving perspective on how cloud and more specifically Snowflake can help companies take advantage of the current opportunity and overcome challenges. Then Vaidya Nathan Jr., Hexaware's SVP and Head of BI and Analytics, will discuss how to get there and overcome cloud migration challenges. And finally, Jim McCune, SVP of IT at IQVIA, will share IQVIA's story and how they're winning on the data cloud today. Now, there's going to be a pause after each speaker's perspective to field questions and foster open conversation and interaction. So please enter your questions within the chat window. We'll also be wrapping up the event with an open Q&A roundtable discussion to discuss the road ahead and what's next for the data and analytics in life sciences industry. Many thanks to our speakers today for participating in today's discussion, and most importantly, many thanks to you in the audience for joining us. Without further ado, I'll now turn it over to Srini Maranganti to kick things off.
Hey guys, good morning. And this is Srini Ganti. I lead the life sciences business for Hexaware. And thanks for being on the call. And my apologies as we go through this process. There was a hiccup for us in the tech piece of it, but I believe we are back in the picture right now. I will use this time to potentially uh, discuss a little more about how the world of life sciences is changing, and potentially also uh, talk about invite our customers and guests to speak a little more about how they are addressing this in the bigger picture. If you want to go into the next slide, this has been a traditional value of drug in the market space for a while, and and if you look at it, it took almost like 10 years to bring out a drug, and the value of bringing a drug, or the cost of bringing a drug, is about close to $2.5 billion. But COVID and the pandemic has changed this tremendously if you look at it, and the uh, the one of the key elements is that, if you've looked at last year, in 2020, there are about six vaccines that were brought in less than a year. The world has to spend like close to $60 billion in order to get there. But fundamentally, it proved that we can bring drugs to the market faster at a much higher cost. And this is something that has permeated the world. If you want to go into the next slide, team, in a much broader way. What we are seeing is that recruiting patients to clinical trials is becoming much more difficult. We are also seeing that majority of the patient engagements or eligibility screening has to be reduced. In fact, it takes 10 minutes to do that instead of 2 hours right now. We want to see how we can potentially help customers do that. But more so from a commercial side, the physicians are giving less and lesser time to the sales reps to work with uh, them to understand the drugs per se. They're asking for real world evidence data. In fact, more from your peers and providers are coming into the mix and talking about real world evidence data. What does this mean for everybody? Um, our pharma customers are coming back and asking us, is there a way they can potentially bring drugs faster to the market, leverage real world data to talk about their efficiency and efficacy, and be able to use data to be able to reach out to patients in a much more effective fashion? And it is boiling down to data. And that is what I believe we're all here to talk about. If you want to move on to the next slide, how do we contribute to your healthier world leveraging data? And how do we accelerate connecting world health data using cloud, using AI/ML, and drive compliance through that process? So today we are joined by a group of experts who have done this, who have worked through this. Welcome to Snowflake team, uh, and of course uh, IQVIA. In fact, IQVIA has been a pioneer in driving more drugs to the world. Especially in the recent past, they have done a phenomenal job of collaborating with some of the largest pharma companies to bring some of the vaccines, especially around COVID. And with that, I have a question. Let's start with a question to Jim. Jim, you're on the call, and we'd love to hear your perspective. You're the largest company out there which does this from a data perspective. What are you seeing from a healthcare data perspective? How are you seeing this emerging from big data and real world data?
Yeah. So, hey, hello, everybody. Yeah, interesting question. So, really, the dynamics around drug discovery trials, COVID's actually been a really good accelerator of moving this process to make the timelines more shorter. So, as an example, I mean, most people know that on the typical approval of something like a vaccine or a new drug, it could be a 5 to 10 year window. You know, within last year, we saw that we were accelerating timelines to the point where we were randomizing for one particular trial, vaccine trial. We randomized 40,000 patients inside of 8 weeks, and that typically would have been a 9 month to 12 month window. And because of the nature of being able to extend to the cloud, high performance computing, machine learning for better identification of investigators, all this comes into play to essentially really contract those timelines from finding the right investigators to go conduct the trial. So I think more than anything, there's been a confluence of technology, which includes machine learning, which includes high performance computing, with kind of just a global need to kind of really bring in those timelines. So now kind of the challenge, right, as technology folks, bar's kind of been raised. So now, they're saying, what can we do quicker? So now we're seeing situations where, what can we do in the area of digital trials where, maybe we don't even have to have a lot of patient interaction. So that's going to accelerate those timelines. So I think COVID has been, unfortunately, a global tragedy, but from a technology innovation point of view, it has driven a lot of the innovation as well. So I think that's probably an overriding theme I've seen over the last, say, 18 months.
And with that team, let's bring in the Snowflake team to the forefront, because they are solving this in the life sciences industry as well. And probably it's a nice pivot for the Snowflake team to talk a little more about how they are potentially working with some of the largest pharma companies and also firms like IQVIA. Jesse, over to you.
Great, thanks a lot, Srini. Yeah, and Jim, I think your points there were really key. When you talk about how, COVID, of course, has been a tragedy worldwide, it's really kind of opened up a number of different opportunities within the industry. And in my role at Snowflake, I get to work with a number of our customers across life sciences, across the broader healthcare and life sciences ecosystem. And we're starting to see a number of different capabilities that are being enabled for the industry that kind of correspond with some of those changes that are being driven by COVID. So actually, if you jump back to slide 8, this kind of highlights some of the things that we're starting to see. And I thought I'd kind of talk through this through the life cycle of the typical process of the development, the manufacturing, the commercialization, and ultimately the monitoring of a new product itself. So if you want to put slide 8 on screen, one of those first changes I think that we've seen that's being driven by these changes within the industry is the growth of decentralized clinical research. Nature reported that over 1,000 different organizations had trial disruptions last year. And a big part of that is because we saw enrollments drop. People didn't want to come in and potentially be exposed. And you saw statistics like where 15 to 20% of trials were operating in a decentralized capacity prior to this. And that jumped up to 90% by the beginning of this year. You're also starting to see that this not only allows people to participate from the potential home locations, but more of a hybrid approach where we're starting to leverage the retail pharmacy ecosystem or the retail healthcare ecosystem to help facilitate this, either for things like enrollments or for actually participating in the protocol and taking various measurements throughout the process itself. And this enables a couple of different changes. One, you have the ability to now start capturing real-time data on your patients in the various different treatment protocols. And this creates this feedback loop with the clinicians where you could start, optimize treatment strategies in real time. It also starts to leverage a lot of the number of, the vast number of kind of wearables and connected devices that are associated with health these days, whether it's remote patient monitoring technologies, whether it's smartwatches that are measuring all sorts of vitals, telehealth, and many others. And this is creating this flood of new data that just didn't exist in the industry a couple of years back. So we're starting to see a lot more organizations think about, how do I manage this at scale? And how do I create a capability that allows me to easily collaborate on that data amongst all the players, whether it's the sponsors that are involved, the various different CROs that are helping to facilitate this, and those retail facilities and laboratory locations that can be able to do this at scale. As we start to move further up the value chain and we think about supply chain, and this is still on that same slide 8 there, last year really taught us that being able to mitigate risk is really, really important here as well. For 40 years, supply chain orthodoxy was all about being able to reduce my inventory position, to rationalize the number of vendors I'm working with, and ultimately move forward in this just-in-time sort of reorder point to run things as efficiently as possible. But when crisis hits and you realize that 40% of all of your API is just coming from a couple of markets and countries, this can create a ton of risk. So now we're starting to see somewhat of a reversal of that mentality, where folks are now thinking about, how do I start to not just simply balloon up my inventory levels and use that as a way to protect me against any sort of instability, but gain greater visibility to all aspects of the supply chain, not just within the four walls of my organization, but things like inventory positions, production schedules at my upstream suppliers, things like inventory positions and consumption data at my downstream distribution network and some of the retail partners there as well. And being able to share that information in real time so that I can actually start to incorporate that into my regular planning. Now, not just a one-time snapshot, but if I need to know on a Wednesday at 3 p.m. exactly what sort of on-hand inventory my distributor has of my product, I can go and check that on demand and be able to do that without a whole lot of friction. On the commercial side, we've seen a number of factors driving folks towards the omni-channel direction. Customers, I would say that, rep access has been decreasing for a number of years, and we've seen this, acceleration of digital engagement. And we've also seen this expectation of our customers and our HCPs that we work with, where they want to have on-demand access to information, either through, chat capabilities with various different members of commercial and medical teams, through the use of various different apps. They want to be able to not only interact with drug reps, but also look at scientifically and peer-reviewed information as well. So you have a number of different touch points and a number of different types of content that are really required to kind of find the exact right solution for each and every one of our customers. And being able to pull all of those pieces of content and information together around that is really critical to optimizing this approach going forward. And then the last piece I'll mention here is really around the increasing use of real world evidence, not just for safety use or optimizing various different trial design and protocols, but we're now seeing increasing use in commercialization as payers are looking to leverage more and more of this data, facilitate some of these outcomes based models with regard to pricing and market access. And they're not just looking at claims and medical data anymore either, but the broader ecosystem of that real world data that's coming from those wearables. It's coming from patient reported outcomes, demographics data, even things like social determinants of health. So being able to share this with payers and be able to easily access some of these third party data sources that come from the broader ecosystem is really critical to making this, making this work going forward. So if you jump to slide 10, people often ask, well, what does Snowflake have to do with any of that? And typically the challenge that we're seeing is that a lot of this data exists in individual silos that are associated with some of the core technologies that folks are buying for the individual functional areas, or from some of the core data vendors. And they're looking for a place to not only easily consolidate that information, but be able to enable specific outcomes. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do, is to provide a single cloud-based data warehouse that allows you to enable several outcomes from field force effectiveness analytics to predictive actions to promo mix modeling, to streaming of real-time data from some of the wearables that we've talked about, to processing not only structured data, but being able to marry that up with unstructured data like TOM images or HL7 data from healthcare. Typically, the core capabilities that customers look at us for is that not only do you have a centralized place to manage all of this within the cloud, but you have a flexible architecture that allows you to carve out specific compute power for any one of these workloads without having to create a separate copy of the data to do so. So if I'm running a forecasted enrollment algorithm for clinical trials, and this requires a ton of compute power, I don't want that to impact the random querying that may be happening against my real world data set or against my operational reporting that's happening against my data warehouse. I want to be able to facilitate all of these workloads against a single copy of the data with a single security paradigm, but with dedicated compute resources for each that I could spin up and down on demand, so that I can manage my cost very effectively, yet still have the flexibility from a performance standpoint. Now, the other aspect that's unique is the ability to collaborate with the ecosystem. And this is kind of this sixth workload you see on the right that says data sharing. And if you go to the next slide here, this was really born out of a capability that we introduced because we had more and more multinational customers who were signing on to Snowflake. And the core reason they were doing this, of course, is that they wanted to solve the internal silo problem. they had different cloud strategies where you may have, EMEA on Azure Netherlands, you may have the US on AWS East, and you may be using GCP in Asia Pacific. And the challenge that they were having there, of course, is that they didn't want to have a separate siloed Snowflake approach because they had a multivariate cloud strategy internally. So we built an internal capability, we called it SnowGrid, that essentially connects not only various different regions together, but even regions and different cloud providers together. So that when an end user goes into Snowflake, it looks like one global interconnected database. They didn't have to have separate silos due to cloud providers. And because you can have that global interconnectedness within an organization, that also means you can have that same sort of global interconnectedness with any other Snowflake customer in the ecosystem. So this is enabled, as we'll see on the next slide, the ability to share data in place, meaning that if you wanted to collaborate with a CRO on research, no longer are you creating an extract of the data set and then uploading that to some cloud bucket or making it available through an encrypted email, but you can actually share it directly within the table where it exists. And this could be sharing of a table, an entire database, an individual row or column within that table. You could be doing this with various levels of security, like dynamic data masking. So if there's some data within that might be protected that can't be shared, that can be masked based on a policy. And the beauty of that is that the consumer sees these updates in real time. And this is really taking off over the course of the last year and a half or so. One of the things that you'll see on the next slide, and this is a build, is that when we introduced this capability in early 2020, you'll see here on the left that there are a couple of different points here with various different lines connecting between them. And this is a visual representation of the sharing that's going on within the ecosystem. And as you can see from the right, this has exploded. This has truly taken off, and a number of folks are doing this. And what you'll see as this slide builds here, if you click forward a moment, is that this is not only point-to-point sharing where folks are collaborating on clinical research, on supply chain, on third-party commercialization, but many of the traditional data as a service providers like Acuvia and others are now leveraging Snowflake as an ideal mechanism to deliver more value to customers. Not only can they deliver this information faster with fewer integration workloads, but again, the information is real time as it's being updated to both parties. And so, I think it's best to skip down to slide 15 at this point, because we're starting to see kind of this take hold in a number of different ways. One slide further, please. Thank you. In that, this is not only enabling, this can be used to enable kind of collaboration within the four walls of an organization. So a lot of folks are thinking about how to use this same capability to set up an internal data marketplace so that I can easily share commercial data across, geographic boundaries, across various different functional boundaries that I have within my organization. And if you go to the next slide, you can start to see the next step here where folks are saying, all right, well, how can I take this a step further? We talked about collaboration within supply chain. This is a great way where potentially a manufacturer and a distributor could be sharing downstream demand information to impact that manufacturer's forecast, so they could get ahead of any sort of shock or drop in demand as they're seeing it sooner than the manufacturer will. Same thing on the if you're working with a CSO and maybe you have a contract medical team or a contracted call center, and you're trying to capture all the given touch points with an individual physician or customer, this is an easy way to collaborate across potential CRM technologies, so that you can enable a next best action algorithm that's using all the latest data. And then the last slide here, if we'll skip one further, is really showing that not only are we enabling point-to-point collaboration within the ecosystem, but we have a Snowflake data marketplace where vendors like IQVIA and a number of others are providing information that's readily queryable directly through Snowflake. So it uses that same data sharing mechanism, but you can go into the marketplace to go in and sign up to potentially query and sample information across not only data that's traditional to the life sciences industry, but across all industries, whether this is financial, demographic information, COVID research data, social determinants of health, weather, traffic, and foot patterns, you name it. This is a rapidly growing component of our ecosystem and is really kind of key to our overall data cloud strategy. So that's that's kind of Snowflake in a nutshell there. And typically, when we're at this part of the conversation, customers will often ask us, this is great. I'd love to to get started, but my organization is still new to the cloud, or we're still developing our cloud strategy, and they want a roadmap to be able to do this most effectively. That's often in line with some of the industry best practices. And at Snowflake, we work with great partners like Hexaware who live and breathe this sort of thing and do this sort of thing every day, and they have demonstrated experience within the life sciences industry. So I'm happy to pass it over to my colleague, Vaidya, to speak about that a bit further.
Yeah, Jesse. So there's a couple questions from the audience here before we jump to Vaidya, if you don't mind. So the
Sure.
first question is, can I use data sharing to share inventory data to impact supply chain planning? So, for example, are people using this for multi-enterprise demand sensing?
Yeah. So we're starting to see this, particularly within the distributor community, and I touched on this a bit earlier, where I'll give you an example. We're working with a medical device manufacturer that builds COVID test kits, and one of the big challenges that they're having is that they're struggling to figure out where exactly the next hotspot will pop up, because these things are somewhat unpredictable, and we've seen them kind of migrate, certainly within North America, around various different regions. And one of their big challenges is, I don't want to forward deploy inventory and have to go redeploy it somewhere else later, because nobody's buying the test kits now when we really need them in Baton Rouge or wherever it might be. And so what they're doing is they're actually working with McKesson in this particular case to be able to provide some visibility to where are you seeing warehouse withdrawals and retail consumption demand. We know that you're not going to place a replenishment order with us for another 3 or 4 weeks, but we want to see what you're seeing now so that we can get ahead of any sort of spike, so that we can get we can manage that appropriately and we're not scrambling. And I think whether you're in life sciences, whether you're in healthcare, or really any industry right now, everyone is acutely aware of the challenges of being supply constrained. We're all seeing empty shelves somewhere right now. So everyone is trying to figure out better ways to do this that don't just mean I'm going to hold extra inventory and balloon up my balance sheet to try and weather the storm. There's smarter ways to go about this, and sharing within the Snowflake ecosystem is a big one that we're seeing a lot of traction in.
Perfect. Thanks, Jesse. And the final question we have here is Snowflake compatible with Part 11 for GXP workloads, clinical data, et cetera?
Yes. Yeah, this is big for the industry for sure. So yes, we are. We are not only HIPAA compliant, we are high trust certified. We're compliant. We are FedRAMP moderate, FIPS 140-2, and we are compatible with GXP workloads. So 3 of the 10 top pharma today are actually using us in that capacity, where they're leveraging Snowflake for PHI and clinical data, and they have validated those environments as well. And there are certain capabilities that I would actually add, within the platform to help facilitate compliance with that statute. One in particular is the ability to go back and restore a point in time, particularly with regard to a study. And Snowflake has built-in capabilities to do this, not just for clinical data, but for any data. We have a function called time travel, which allows you to go back within a point in time and look at the state of the data within Snowflake as of a specific date. As of yesterday, as part of our Snow Day, we actually announced in private preview new query auditing capabilities. So now you can actually also see how people are interacting with that data set as well, allowing you to build a further audit trail, not just in terms of the data at rest, but the actual consumption against it.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you very much, Jesse. Great. So at this point, we'll hand it over to Vaidya to talk about some of the migration challenges and how folks are overcoming those. Vaidya?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thanks, Jesse and James. Hello and very good morning to everyone. My name is Vaidya, and I head up the data and AI business globally for Hexaware. I'm indeed happy to be part of this event along with our partner Snowflake and our customer IQVIA. Can I bring up? Yeah. So can you go full screen for clarity? Yeah, thank you. So while I was putting together the cloud migration and data modernization challenges for life sciences industry based on our various customer experiences, I was reflecting on how things have changed in the last couple years, right? Like everyone said, to create, test, and manufacture vaccines, at a scale in months, rather than years, distribute them across the world and administer them successfully, phase by phase across demographics. You may call it industrialized biology, we may call it biopharma 4.0, but the undisputable fact is we have learned new ways of working, right? Thanks to the pandemic, amidst all these challenges that we faced. Though every industry was impacted, I would think that life sciences industry was and is at the epicenter of the whole thing, right? Whether it is the emphasis on drug supply, in the sense reassessing the manufacturing and supply footprint, whether it is spike in telemedicine, well, not just telemedicine, virtual drug discovery, virtual healthcare, or digital health as a whole, right? When we talk about virtual drug discovery, we've seen vaccine development at unparalleled pace, catering to the demands of, the ventilators, the PPE kits, the key medicines, a whole lot, right? The regulatory need adding on to it for full product traceability, from raw materials to manufacturing, packaging, labeling, all the way up to end patient use, right? And furthermore, pharmacovigilance, tracking down the adverse events in real time. We've seen it all, right? The challenges were huge. And the complexity of having to deal with diverse data sets there, breaking the data silos, the volume and velocity of data handling that was required, at the same time, ensuring compliance to evolving standards and regulations, not to forget the cost of data breaches thereof. Amid all this, life sciences players, some of them early movers to cloud, built their cloud data platforms. They did much better than others, right? Many realized that approaching cloud as a technology play instead of a business opportunity couldn't succeed in the transformation journey. And added to that, the siloed systems across the value chain of life sciences, the security concerns, regulatory compliance needs, didn't help the cause to expedite this transformation journey when needed. Digital transformation will carry over to the new normal, and it will only accelerate from here on, right? But what is common to all of this, and what is really powering all of this, is it's all about data, right? So the solution to all of this lies in getting the data fabric right, and the data architecture right and ready, enabling the digital data flow seamlessly across the life sciences value chain. In fact, uncertainty has become the key business driver, and that will be the going forward, that will be the way that the industry will function. Given all these challenges, the good news is we at Hexaware, as trusted partners, have been there with a multitude of our customers across industries, including life sciences, across geographies, have helped them, overcome these challenges. Can I go to the next slide, please? So with all the useful learnings on the ground, we developed our Amaze for Data and AI platform that powers a data-driven enterprise. Our Amaze for Data and AI platform is an automated platform for enterprise data warehouse and analytics ecosystem transformation. It helps in migrating data and analytics workloads to the cloud. With our industry best practices baked in and advanced certifications for reliability, accuracy, and repeatability of the platform, we deliver an accelerated, smarter and cost-effective migration solution, starting from automated data landscape discovery, complexity assessment and scoring, all the way up to automated end-to-end migration of data, data pipelines, and data visualization across all major clouds. Azure, AWS, GCP, with Snowflake being the a center of the whole architecture. Amaze for Data and AI ensures accurate, reliable, and rapid transformation through the smart inbuilt security and compliance features. We'll be talking about the details as we kind of demo the platform to you in a while. It has got a wide range of metadata adapters. More importantly, it ensures zero disruption, to business. If we can go to the next slide, please. Right. So Amaze for Data and AI supports migration from almost all major on-prem legacy data warehouses, big data ecosystems, and MPP appliances to Snowflake, as you can see there. Right. With 80% of the effort automated, whether it is Teradata, Netezza, Exadata, or Hadoop and Hive ecosystem, or even Redshift or Synapse to Snowflake. Right? It has been proven to deliver 60 to 70% of savings in migration costs and timelines. There on the right side, you see a typical example of the set of critical processes involved in the migration from Oracle Exadata to Snowflake. If you can go to the next slide, please. Yes. A typical engagement model will look like this. Starting from pre-sale support, assessment, MVP, or proof of concept, for a specific value chain, logical chunk. Migration plan at a scale based on the learnings through assessment and MVP. And then the migration execution and support. That's this complete engagement model. After assessment and engaging through the MVP and deep discovery, we'll be answering a lot of questions that our customers ask, right? And the questions could be, both business and technology. Just to give you some, typical questions that get asked during the engagement. How to make data and insights more accessible across our organization? That's a question, that's a strategic question that needs to get answered before we embark on our transformation journey. How to ensure flexible and faster adoption of analytics for competitive edge? So how do we bring upon analytics workload in the conditions where we have all the data, but the environment is uncertain? How do I monetize my data quickly and at a scale? Right? These are some of the business questions that get answered when we engage through the assessment, through deep discovery, and the processes. The technical questions that get answered are, what technology stack and which cloud platform architecture should I choose? Because our clients are faced with, the new cool technology syndrome every day. I mean, somebody walks in and tells them that this is the coolest technology that can solve their problems. So they're confused with myriad technologies. So we come in there to help them assess what is right for them, their existing investments, the current desired future state, and what technology stack is required and how to choose them. And more importantly, how to kind of stitch them together for end-to-end value proposition. And there are questions if it's a large enterprise, like which of my data marts are complex? You did complexity scoring through assessment. So which is more suitable for me to move to cloud first so that we can instill confidence with the relevant stakeholders in the enterprise? Whether it will be IaaS or PaaS and why. So all of these questions get answered as we embark on our engagement. So, and also, how do I minimize the impact to business during execution? And we also come out with a very comprehensive, business plan that will project the ROI and the payback on your investments. If you can go to the next slide, please. Yeah. So all of this is not just, one time and done, kind of engagement. we continuously partner with our customers to co-create value. We talked about how we can transform to being an adaptive enterprise, with a composable architecture. How do we kind of enable data initiatives that should address challenges to provide a governed yet flexible, personalized yet holistic analytics and ecosystem that responds to uncertainties at a speed and scale required, and more importantly leads to measurable impact and desired outcomes. And so that really has to bring in the agility and transparency both inside the enterprise operation space and also with the patients, right? And as we are talking of IoT enabled laboratories, to which is actually propelling the usage of real world data and real world evidence, be it 3D printing or bioprinting, or AI enabled diagnostics, especially around imaging interpretation, genomic and precision medicine, algorithmic medicines. When all of these, and not to forget cell and gene therapies becoming mainstream soon, all of these changes and innovations and enabling that impact of medical innovation at a scale, enabling hybrid care delivery models, human machine collaboration, if I may say, the need, the physical and virtual channels, omni-channel that Jesse talked about. And most importantly, the need for providers, payers, and life sciences players to come together to serve their customers across the care continuum. All of this will drive the need for a sophisticated data platform to support the entire life sciences value chain, be it pre-trials, trials, commercial supply, and be able to trace data across all of these, a cloud-based BPLM, if I may say, biopharma lifecycle management solution that can integrate all relevant stakeholders, and also bring in external stakeholders like the CROs, contract research organization, or CDMOs, contract development and manufacturing organization, seamlessly integrate them into the data platform. Streamlining and digitalizing biopharma operations will be the way forward. Now, after landing all the data into Snowflake, what do we do with that data? Right? How do we put that humongous data to effective use for business outcomes? That is where all of these use cases that you see on the screen come in. Right? Infusing AI ML, leveraging AI ML big time, whether it is automated medical record classification for clinical trials or building predictive models. Jesse talked about recommender engines for medical reps, or comprehensive, drug side effects mining. All of this, across the value chain, the kind of AI ML use cases, some of which we have implemented for our customers, some of which are kind of WIP. So these are, some of the, not just about one-time transformation, but about living in the cloud, infusing AI for, increased productivity and impact through solutions. So let me now turn it over to my, lead architects in our data and AI life sciences practice to walk you through the assets we have created based on our experience in the life sciences space per se, specific to life sciences. The kind of templates, the kind of reference architectures that we have put together, whether it is MDM solution for life sciences or whether it is HIPAA compliance or high trust compliance. So you will hear from our practitioner as to how that reference architecture and the template has been implemented across. Over to you, Parthiban.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Vaidya. Thanks for that intro. And I think as you have been hearing through, this journey, we started with the challenge, and we went through how COVID has change the landscape of life sciences. And we have taken cognizance of all of these, and we see how the market is playing to this. And thereby, we have come out with this reference architecture, which is based on our experience combined with the changes that has been happening in the market. And you would see that Snowflake is at the fulcrum of all of this because of the nature of the capabilities that it offers, while we also add on top of it the Amaze flavor that Vaidya was talking about, which brings in the necessary flexibility to analyze the information that you might currently have and use that information to bring it to a cloud platform that is so unique in a way that it can handle all the challenges that have been highlighted. It has these information about how to collect the data, how to transform it. In addition to the Snowflake being the data platform of storage, we have highlighted the components that we can leverage, which are all cloud native in nature, because going forward the need is to scale depending on the data volume, depending on the size, which is all dependent on the scenario that we are going to live in with. And we see that the platforms need to be flexible enough to cater to that, and that's why you would see this platform aligned towards that, to ensure that whatever the data challenges that might be there and what are the standards that are upcoming, how we cope up with that is how this architecture is laid out, ensuring any challenges that come along with data platforms that might be on your on-prem environment today, and adhering to standards as well, right? So finally, I think we look at some of the analytical marts that we have highlighted here, which are very sample oriented, which we are building for the clinical trial world, and how the business side of it, like the way it was talked about for inventory and for other roles, how do we make it enabled through this platform, is how this platform is being shown. And you could see the additional factors, because when you do all of this, security is a key element, and that's all achieved through data governance layer, which we bring on board, again making use of cloud native components that can integrate well with Snowflake. With that, I think I will hand over to my colleague Prasad, who takes care of the Amaze solution, and he will take you through the demo for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Parthivan. Let me share my screen for the demo. Can you see my screen? Yeah. So hi all, this Prasad. This is the Amaze data and AI platform built internally within Hexaware to take care of your on-premise data warehouse workload migration towards a cloud platform across data pipeline and visualization. So as we see that data is sitting in various silos, this particular platform allows me to go and connect to any of the data silos, be it any platform on premise. It can make a connection to get the details. So what I'm going to demonstrate now here is how we can migrate our Oracle Exadata workload from on-premise to Snowflake. Here, the overall demo is distributed in 3 areas. I will first show you how the data models are getting migrated. Then I will run through this the data objects, which is procedures, functions, how we can migrate to Snowflake equivalent. And then in last, I will also show you how we can take care of the data movement as well. So to start with this data model migration, I'm showing this as the offline model wherein we extract Oracle scripts from the database and then upload it here. And then once it's analyzed, we go for the conversion of it. And what we do is like we convert that into a equivalent Snowflake uh, data model script, wherein Amaze can deploy the solution directly, the scripts on Snowflake, wherein you can see that yes, this can be it can go and create the migrate tables on Snowflake on a single click. So we are now deploying. Before deployment, you can see it, those table definitions are not available here. Now the deployment is successful here. We can again go back and just refresh our screen. I can see that all those data models for these various tables, those now got migrated from Oracle into Snowflake. So that's on the data model track of it. With that, we'll just go ahead and we'll see how the procedures where the main business logic is stored, which is developed all over the last 10 to 15 years or more than that. So it's always a, a business always feel like, okay, it's a critical task that the business logic which is there in my on-premise data warehouse should not get modified, or it should not lose its importance while getting migrated. And that's the reason we are seeing how this process can be much more automated and a lesser of a manual intervention, wherein we can avoid human errors getting induced in the process of conversion. So this is how I have uploaded the procedure here, and then we can actually convert the same procedure to Snowflake equivalent. Uh, the entire solution is driven by the metadata, and not only the conversion, it also gives a good amount of uh, the uh, the reports, the assessment reports for the analysis as well as the conversion. So we'll see and we'll go through those reports in a quick time. What you see here on the screen, it's a comparison between the Oracle initial procedure and which is got converted into a Snowflake equivalent here on my screen. So we can again download that procedure and take it and run it onto the Snowflake server to get the object created there. So now coming to the reports, yeah, as Vaidya mentioned, this particular solution, we also got a good amount of reports which gives a complete transparency on what is the complexity within your underlying data warehouse, wherein how you should look at the objects which are complex needs to take care during the migration, where and this all is all metadata driven. These definitions of complexity, those are as per the industry standards. However, we have given an option here that if you differ uh, from those industry standards for your specific data warehouse, you can actually you can tell us and we can reconfigure those here. It's just a matter of configuration to define the complexity parameters. So once we see the complexity, we can also look at the fit gap analysis even before migration. So what you see here in a typical uh, uh, procedure or a function where you have your business logic, what are the keywords which are very specific to Oracle, because I'm using this Oracle to Snowflake, what all those keywords which are there, which are supported in Snowflake that you see here, which are unsupported, and those unsupported keywords are there on which all lines, and that line numbers, all that comes handy. Even we click onto the conversion part of it. So that's the value delivered through this particular platform, Amaze for Data and AI, wherein you get a complete understanding of your on-premise, and you know upfront that what are the challenges, where are the challenges, where we need a manual intervention. And hence one of the advantage of this analysis is we are able to tell you how long we will take you to migrate it from your on-premise workloads to Snowflake on cloud. So with that, we'll just quickly see how even the consolidated report, wherein you can look at all of the complexity, all of the distribution of the objects in a single view of a report, in a graphical representation, as well as the detailed reports. And then this is one of the deliverables that we generally give when you do the automated assessment using Amaze for data and AI. So you can see that each of the procedure, each of the object is there. Also, post conversion, we also provide how many number of lines were there in my object at on-premise, how many we got converted in an automated way, how many we have commented, and how many are unsupported where we need a manual intervention. So with that, I will get into the data movement part of it. Now we are connecting to Oracle database and then moving the data first into S3 bucket on AWS, and from there we'll move it to Snowflake stage, and from there to Snowflake data structures, which we just created using Amaze. So we have an interface where we can go and select schema, one or more tables. For this demo, I just selected one table, but then we can go ahead and start moving the data. So what it does, it actually creates 3 different files, unloading the data from my on-premise database, and then I can run those scripts directly, or I can run through this particular solution wherein you can see that I got a data in one of the folder, I got metadata in another folder, and I got a statistical information which I'm going to use it for reconciliation. Okay, so this data, once the data moves into S3 bucket, from there we move this data using Amaze to Snowflake stage. At every point in this data movement, we do a reconciliation, and what you saw, those statistical data folder, is like nothing but it generates a statistical values for all numeric columns, and it gets compared when it against the source versus my S3 data, as well as when it moves to the staging. And at every stage we are reconciling, ensuring it that there is absolutely no data loss across this data movement, to ensure that yes, it is not only the number of records which got migrated properly, but the value of the data is not at change, or there is no meaningful data loss there. So what you see here, as I said, like these are the statistical calculation, mean, max, sum for each of the numeric data type that we are bringing, and we are comparing against the source value versus what has been migrated to Snowflake. That's how we ensure that this particular platform reconciles the data, not only migrate it, and there is no additional effort for reconciliation to certify that yes, this migration is successful. Now, because of these all automated processes, metadata-driven automated processes, we are actually bringing more than almost 60 to 70% effort savings in overall migration, and that's something that's the real value delivered to this particular platform, along with faster time to market. So that's something that this particular platform brings to any of the migration. Thanks. Over to you, James.
Awesome. Thanks, Prasad. So we do have a couple questions here for Vaidya. Perfect. Vaidya, so a couple questions here from the audience. Why do you call Amaze smarter and cost effective?
Yeah. So see, one of the problems that predominantly we have seen with our clients is they're not being able to assess and fully understand their current data landscape and ecosystems. Right? They embark on the journey of transformation, and en route they discover, there is a lot of surprise for them. They discover the complexity, and then try to figure out, and change the solution to adapt those surprises changes that are coming in. The smartness, stems from the fact that we have a foolproof assessment toolkit, right? To be able to completely assess the current landscape of the legacy data warehouse ecosystem, and be able to score the complexity, what will work through automation, what will not work through automation, where will you need that intervention. All of that is well upfront known, and there are no surprises en route, right? So, and this happens across all layers, right? Be it data layer, data pipelines, or visualization. And there are not any players who do it across, all layers with this high amount of reliable automation. And automation brings in its cost effectivity. So, getting to know your current landscape, the complexities, and working smartly through a plan that is easily achievable, and the stack that is, getting ready with the desired future state stack, knowing, how to automate the components, data objects across layers. That is why it is smart and cost effective. James, you're on mute.
Thank you, Vaidya. I apologize for that. The second question here is, how do you ensure data security while migrating data from on-premise to Snowflake?
Yeah, so we do use, the during migration, we use the right protocols, whether it is TLS3 protocol while data is in transit, and and also use AES 256 encryption while data is at rest in the data lake. And also, Snowflake is HIPAA and HITRUST compliant, right? Data in the cloud gets protected against any alteration, anything that could destroy the data veracity of the data through any unauthorized channel. There are protocols, there are mechanisms that is part of the Amaze platform that helps us ensure security. I would request if Parthiban Prasad want to add anything for this. Parthiban Prasad, you want to add anything to the protocols that I mentioned in terms of what is embedded as part of the? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
You're on mute, Parthiban.
I'm sorry. Thanks for that, Vaidya. Yeah. So I think you covered most of it, and what we leverage is all the cloud native, security features. And on top of it, if customer wants to have the additional, a layer of security, I think we also support that, and that can be overlaid on top of the existing cloud native uh, encryption logic that it supports. You talked about TLS, and you talked about even native security when it is at rest, which is, and also there are, anonymization that Snowflake offers that we take. I think it was mentioned about Jesse when he talked about his, foray of content. And we leverage all these factors to ensure that the data is secure, and it's not only secure while it's stored, but also when it is getting accessed, we ensure all those anonymization logic and everything is put in place to ensure that your data is compliant, as well as any unauthorized access is prevented. Prasad, you may want to add as well.
I think
Speaking
Parthiban, you have covered.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Parthiban, you have covered all the aspects that are baked into Amaze for Data and AI. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Vaidya, Parthiban, and Prasad. Appreciate that insight. So at this point in the conversation, we're going to move over to Jim McEwen over at IQVIA, who's going to talk about their experience and their path to success in the cloud. Jim, thanks for joining us.
Hey, everybody. Nice to talk to you again. James, why don't we go ahead and pull up the deck? You want to scroll through? Yeah. So after listening for the last about 60 minutes, so just wanted to kind of give you my take from an engineering perspective and kind of an integration perspective of everything that's been said so far, and also where IQVIA sees a lot of the challenges and a lot of the opportunities in cloud. So IQVIA, and I won't go into all the offerings, and that's for another discussion, but IQVIA, I think over the past 10 years has done a lot in the area of building proprietary tech through our offerings. But inevitably, when it came to time to talk to our customers, and whether that be life science or healthcare or agency customers, or you name it, we work really in all areas of healthcare. I think the number one thing that we really kept coming up with was this idea, that cloud is something that we need to leverage from a customer perspective, and that's their feedback to us. And then kind of B is, how do we do it? And I think for the first maybe 5 to 8 years of people moving to the cloud, it was just this mess, right? So I think our stakeholders and customers, everybody thought it was a good idea. And, there's vendors kind of coming at you from every different direction saying, here's our good cloud technology solutions. And whether that be database or middleware or front-end services or low-code generators, everybody is out there looking for their piece of the pie on the software side, which is great. And we've had to adjust, and, our business is built around serving all customers. So our perspective is a bit unique. So, and what we've seen, and I think over the past, let's say 2 years, is the idea that there is no kind of silver bullet tech stack a lot of times. There's a lot of things that make a lot of sense. But to say that there's only one thing that will work really is probably an approach that makes it difficult for companies to continue to adapt. So as we spoke to our customers, everybody talks about failing fast. It's a great idea. And I don't think anybody would disagree with that. But I think what really came to us was the idea that we need to fix faster. So, whereas, when a technology decision is made that is not perfect, how do we adapt, and how do we go and make a change that actually moves the business forward from a technology perspective? So go ahead, next slide, please, James. So about this time, we started to probably just a little bit of serendipity. We started to work with Snowflake. And I have, and this is kind of our tech ecosystem today. So we talk to our customers. We say the reality is we'll work in pretty much wherever you're at from a technology perspective, assuming you're not going to go buy IQVIA specific proprietary goods and services, which of course we would love you to do. But ultimately, we need to kind of meet you where you're at. And I think that approach is really starting to pay dividends, especially as we move to the cloud, where there's such an acceleration of new technology, right? So when we started our relationship with Snowflake, what we really found with Snowflake was, we have all of the legacy relational databases. We have a very large Hadoop cluster. There's probably not a database that we don't have at IQVIA. Part of my responsibility is to start to shut down the power builders and the mainframes and things like that. But, through the years, because of the nature of our business, we've had to work with really pretty much most back-end database vendors or structures or tools. So when Snowflake came around, what we really found from a cloud perspective is, the whole idea of fix faster really worked well with Snowflake. It just works. And when those guys used to say that to me, I was like, okay. But when we started to use it and started to implement it, it really does. It's that simple. It's a SQL native database, fully functional. But it, like every solution, has limitations. But what I think Snowflake has done a really good job is minimizing the limitations. Obviously, you're not going to get the ultimate high-end performance, but most use cases aren't necessarily need that performance. So from a deployment and a total cost of ownership, we found that it made sense for us. And I think it makes sense for a lot of our customers as well. So kind of the macro trend behind that, if you think about databases and you think about cloud, one of the things that we saw was kind of everybody was going towards this blob storage model, which, getting away from spinning disk and solid state drives. I think that is a play that works really, really well in this idea. And I think Jesse mentioned it before, was there's just crazy new data sets out there. We're doing so much in campaign management. We do web harvesting. We do click data. We do the genomic data. And the idea that this is unstructured or can be unstructured or can be structured, that's where I think from a trend perspective and really where cloud kind of took us to the next level is the ability to use blob as kind of the back-end data store. And again, not the most performant, but it gets you pretty close to where you want to be. And if you need to go look at something else, maybe you want to run workloads on GPUs, there's options out there as well. So I think that has kind of been where we're seeing, going to cloud. So rather than worry about, a specific tech, and we're in a little bit of a unique position because we have customers who have big warehouses built on Hadoop. We have Teradata warehouses we see. We have customers that have large Informatica implementations. And what we found is that by having a strategic plan around moving to cloud, but not necessarily getting into a holy war over the tools, that has been the right approach for IQVIA and for extension for a lot of our customers now. So I think that's kind of the trend that I see. And James, why don't we kind of crank through next slide? So if we look at, and we have an offering out in the market called Human Data Science Cloud. And to me, what Human Data Science Cloud really means is a customer has some type of data integration problem. They might have a data stored in a legacy warehouse on-prem. They might be using AWS or Google Cloud. And then they're using IQVIA data assets, and then they're using some of our competitor data assets. And they just want to mash it all together and do these data mashups. And they want that to be pretty frictionless. They realize that it's never going to be friction-free. And I think what cloud has done has kind of removed some of the friction. So to give you an idea, like how we partner with Snowflake is, we have a customer deployment today, uses our internal data, our integrated data platform, IDP, running on-prem. It's basically an ETL process tool, builds pipelines. We own the technology, but we run that on Snowflake. Why? Because it's easy, and it's implementation costs are low. It's based on a consumption model, so we can go use Snowflake at the right level and have a price, I think, a powerful price point for our customers. So, but then in this case, the customer also uses Snowflake. So then, the data exchange piece comes into play. So we're able to do a lot in the area of publishing data to them. They're publishing sales information and reference information back to us. So this whole idea where Snowflake, because by nature, being cloud native, running on a blob store, works really, really well for us. So, and then of course, if we want to go connect to other things, in this case, it's on AWS, but if we wanted to go connect to Azure or connect to Google or connect to, another cloud solution, we actually have expertise in Triton, which is one of our internal cloud solutions. So this idea and this type of architecture where, we're giving them over 300 data sets, we're putting it into this IQVIA warehouse, we're doing a bunch of data pipelines, and then we're ingesting Snowflake data from Snowflake on their data lake. This is really, to us, the right model. And the good news here is we can make mistakes on the data model. And I'm never going to minimize the importance of good data modeling. But in these type of environments, it's relatively easy to fix. Assuming you have, some diligence around looking at the data. But the idea that unstructured information is just part of your DNA, that always has to be accounted for. So I think, if I'm looking kind of big trends, to me, the idea that, fix faster, implement integration with not just a singular technology, but the ability to integrate with multiple technologies, I think is kind of a huge win as we move to the cloud. So let's go next slide. So just a little bit of the, I guess, the obligatory, like, why we believe we have expertise here. I mean, we run our big data factory internally. And what we found is, with over 200 tenants, 3,800 users, probably over 1,000 data scientists and 22 petabytes, we've burned our hands a lot. And I think what we've realized is that there is no, and our big data factory is a big Cloudera Hadoop distro. Works really, really well for a lot of our workloads. But what we found is we need partners like Snowflake. We need other partners too. We need ML ops partners, and we're doing some work in that area, because I think that's kind of the next step, where I think a lot of companies have hired data scientists, but they're really not able to unlock the power of production ML. So they're not really doing ML at a very competitive price point. So we're doing a lot in that area. But so from our perspective, I think we've spent, a few $100 million making mistakes. But I think at a point now where cloud has kind of taken us is it's this ability to kind of say, all right, we're going to plug in something new. And the whole idea around this is that best practices never go out of style. Even though, you might have a new database, modeling is still important. Having proper tech diligence is still important. Governance is still important. And that best practice piece will always be the foundation of how we kind of run our business at IQVIA. Go ahead, next slide, please. Just a little bit about how we think about cloud. So again, we run our hybrid cloud. It runs on top of AWS, Azure, and Google. Underneath the covers, we have our internal data centers. Our primary data center is in New Jersey, but we have multiple data centers. But we've enabled all of the connectivity and the foundational work. We have a relationship with Microsoft as our foundational partner, but we're not opposed to using AWS where it makes sense, or Google where it makes sense, depending on client needs. And the idea here is that we need to up our game on the engineering side. So our hiring model has changed from hiring a set of skill sets to hiring a mindset. So our expectation is our folks need to have a lot of open source experience. They need to be polyglots, multiple languages. Again, tougher skill set to hire, but when you hire them, they make differences for the organization. So on that, I'll go ahead and stop, and I'll turn the presentation back over to you, James.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. So a couple questions here. Will your platform allow for integrating other data sets that are not owned by IQVIA?
Yeah, we get this question like every day. And the answer is yes. And we do this today. Depending on the type of data, and probably a little foreshadowing of where I think we need to go, is if it's low-level, patient-level information, our bigger challenge, and it's not just as a company, but as an industry, is, we get customers all the time, and there's companies out there that do a really good job in the area of patient tokenization. Companies like Datavant, partner of ours. We work with HealthVerity. They do a really good job of tokenization of a patient and the information there. But what nobody really does well is creating kind of this bulletproof patient identifier that is HIPAA compliant or GDPR compliant, and that you can automatically hook data. So it's kind of in our engineering workshop right now, in IQVIA Engineer, to kind of think about how to go solve that problem globally. But the short answer is yes, and this is something we do as a regular course of action. But part of the challenge is there really is no global standard in terms of things like a patient identifier. And of course, once it's de-identified, then it becomes much more difficult. So we're looking at opportunities to figure out how to go solve that much larger industry problem, which I think once we do, and again, partnering with Microsoft, I think there's opportunities here to really kind of accelerate healthcare, because people want to take their CRO data, right, and they want to de-identify it, and they want to make sure that they can link it to their commercial data, because they want to do real-world evidence studies and outcomes research. And so that part is still has a lot of friction. But my hope is in the next, say, year to 18 months, we're going to be coming to market with some interesting products that I think from a industry perspective will help everybody. Because really the goal of this is, to really remove friction with data integration and allow people to do better type of studies that really can help, figure out how to go treat patients better. So, but yes, we do allow, and we will, in fact, we encourage it, because we realize that our data is only so good in certain areas. And especially when we look globally. So the US is certainly easier because, our data, we have a lot more latitude to do different things with data in the US compared to outside of the US. So this is something that's near and dear to my heart. I've been working with patient level data for 18 years, and it's been a challenge that I think only recently, with the advent of the democratization of kind of distributed ledger technologies, GPU processing, and kind of advanced machine learning, I think we can really start to solve a lot of the linkability issues as well.
All right, thank you, Jim. Also, do customers need to rely on IQVIA's ML models, or can they enhance and build on the ML models built within a pharma company?
Yeah, so bring your own model approach. Yeah, also supportive. What we provide for many of our customers is simply a platform to run your own models. So if you're like use TensorFlow, or if you want to go use something like Databricks to run your models on, or you name it, we've always been about bringing your own models, because again, we don't have all the answers. And I think from that perspective, if somebody's running on Human Data Science Cloud, and honestly, what we've done for a couple of customers, if we stood up Cloudera and we said, we'll install all the tools you want, it's really up to you to bring your own models. So the other, and this is where what we found is, and I mentioned this earlier, is from a modeling perspective, nobody seems to be really great at true productionization of models. So that's why right now we're working with DataRobot, who I believe is in a friendship relationship with Snowflake. So we're looking with DataRobot. I know they acquired Algorithmia recently to kind of really productionize, the model serving piece, the model discoverability piece, hyperparameter tuning, drift detection. So, but we're trying to figure out, as most companies are, what is kind of the best spot of tools. And what we're finding is everybody has different pieces that make sense, and bringing those kind of all those different ML tools together and allowing to have true productionist models. Because, and I think it's called citizen data scientists is the latest buzzword, where people can run their own models and don't have to be data science. I think it's great. But I think a lot of that's still a little bit overblown. We're not there as an industry yet. And candidly, we really only got there in the last 10 years with citizen SQL engineers. So, but I do think there's great progress being made there. Interesting enough, for those folks who are familiar with Salesforce, I think Einstein has made really good traction, but they do it in a very, very narrow box. So they, just primary classification models. It's not really the true cognitive computing models that I think we need for machine learning. But I think Salesforce has done a good job of kind of automating models that run on top of Apex objects. But to me, that's a very limited amount of and kind of use cases, and primarily more commercial use cases rather than kind of the clinical outcomes use cases.
Got it. Thank you, Jim. Last question we have: how often do you partner with smaller biotechs?
Partner? partner or have them as customers, I think is the question. So, and I am, for those of you who haven't noticed, I am certainly not a salesperson, but we have a whole emerging biopharm team. And if there's a more in-depth discussion that you would like to have with us, we would love to have it. IQVIA has a DNA around finding best of breed tech. And if there's tech that emerging biopharm can bring to bear, we'd love to hear from you. Or if you have a need for our data and services, we'd love to hear from you as well. So nothing's off the table. I mean, I can't really speak about specific customers, but on any given week, me as a back office guy, I'm probably speaking to 3 or 4 customers, just about interesting opportunities. I think a lot's going on right now in genomics, which it's a little bit of we'll say something I wish I had more time for. We were charged with building a genomics de-identification engine for the biomarkers. We did that. I learned a ton, but I think that's an area where I continue to get more questions, and I have maybe less answers than I should. But certainly we'd love to have a discussion. So we can certainly take that offline, and we can have Hexaware kind of facilitate the connections.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for your insight, sharing your story. So at this point of the session, so we've covered a lot of the core material and presentation. So we're actually going to bring up all our panel members just to have a quick discussion on the road ahead. For those of you in the audience, please present your questions. We can have those addressed by each of the members here who could chime in. We'll let everyone come up, and then we'll get started. Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, so I'm going to open up the question here. We just kind of wanted to tackle, and maybe we'll do just a little bit of a round robin, but what do you guys as thought leaders in the industry see next in the world of data and analytics for life sciences? Maybe we'll give Jim a little bit of a breather, and maybe Jesse, we can start with you.
Sure. Yeah. So when I think about this question, I think about what's happened over the last couple of years, and everybody's always constantly talking about how we've seen so much change in just the way that the industry itself is operating. And I would say that that's not an aberration. These changes are not only here to stay, but a lot of them, they actually started a couple of years prior to that, back in 2017, 2018. If you looked at some of the the digital transformation roadmaps of some of the major life sciences companies, they wanted to do all of these things. They just had a 5 or a 10-year timeline to do them. And of course, all of that got compressed. So a lot of the changes that we talked about earlier, they're here, they're not going away. And that'll kind of be part of the way that this industry operates going forward. And I think from a data and analytics standpoint, that brings up a couple of key things. One is, enabling and building a culture of data literacy throughout the organization is key. And a lot of the customers that we work with have some level of initiative around this already. Some of the best practices I've seen around here have really been organizations that take kind of a multi-pronged approach, where they have IT and analytics teams that are driving technology decisions that can enable some of these new capabilities. But then they have a kind of a cross-functional component where individual departmental heads and leaders are signing off on some of the key metrics that are going to drive that part of the business. Because the whole concept behind data literacy means is that people are actually using this stuff to make decisions. It's not just an influencing factor, but it's truly starting to drive their behavior. And that only happens if there's trust. So being able to enable that trust at the highest levels to say that, if I see a back order report, it means X. And I know that I can believe this number, and everyone else is going to operate on this number. You start to be able to build some competency around that. And I think this is especially important because, when you think about what we talked about earlier, the data landscape itself, it's not consolidating in terms of the number of sources or the variety of them. It's going in the opposite direction. So the technology decisions that are going to help people succeed really have to kind of enable this strategy and not to open another can of worms here, but enable the concept of these FAIR principles. And so many of the customers we're working with are now looking at how do they leverage Snowflake to actually provide that sort of ecosystem within their organization.
Awesome. Thank you, Jesse. Srini, how about your thoughts?
Yeah, I strongly believe that the market has changed dramatically in terms of the need and the way the patients and the pharmaceutical companies are looking at collaborating with each other. So focusing on patients will become extremely important, and and pharma companies are going in that direction. So one, uh, if I were to look at how data would change in the next 2 or 3 years and potentially in the next 5 years, I will sum it up with one word: collaboration. I think pharma companies should be given the ability to collaborate with various other actors in the ecosystem, uh, be it patients, be it data companies like IQVIA, or the ecosystem of players and providers to come with therapies that are much more effective, and then leverage the real world data that is coming out of that to be able to reach the needy population as quickly as we can. So collaboration will be key, and any capabilities that players like Snowflake and IQVIA can bring to the table will be great. And as a firm, sure, we'll be very keen to work with pharma companies to enable them uh, to bring the collaboration to the forefront.
Thanks, Srini. Jim, how about yourself? I mean, obviously, you guys have done a lot of advancement in the space today, but what do you see on the horizon? What's the next big jump for IQVIA and the industry in general?
Yeah, I think we're still continuing down this continuum of um, using cloud to accelerate insights, making data more easily integratable. Um, yeah, and that to me is, and then of course, we're getting challenged more and more for real time complex analytics. So, about 10 years ago, we kind of solved the idea that we can do complex patient identification and cohorting on very large data sets, 100 million patient data sets in seconds. So, but now we're starting to get more and more around the idea that not only do we want to figure out, you know, identify a patient cohort. Let's say we're looking for patients with an elevated A1C that have taken 6 scripts for metformin in a 6-month time period. So measuring compliance and persistency, and also doing a patient journey. So what we're starting to see now is our customers, they want all that rich analytics, but they want it in true real time. Because what we find is so much time and money and effort and frustration and anger happens because these complex studies are difficult. They're difficult from a stakeholder customer perspective, where sometimes it's very difficult to identify, and especially with COVID, because of the crazy nature of all these ICD-10 codes that never really had activity before, identifying the right code sets and having run that data, and inevitably there's mistakes. So I think what we're starting to see is we want to have the ability to iterate on very, very complicated problems and questions that are getting asked. And we want to do that in real time or near real time. I think we're at a point where technology is getting there. Obviously, with cheap GPUs available through cloud providers, that makes it easier. So there's not a big kind of OpEx or CapEx spend, rather. But to me, I'm seeing a lot more of, especially on the kind of our core IQVIA engineering team, the ability to answer these questions very quickly. And then on the commercial side, it continues to be layering in, these differentiated type of analytics, next best action, gross to net. So some of these things, I think, but again, to me, it's the ability to introduce these and then also layer in machine learning, because the data sets are only getting harder and harder to kind of figure out and curate. So I think machine learning becomes a part of that as well. So I would say that's probably a second major trend, is after we want everything in real time, and we know the technology is out there to support, because that's a lot of people know the technology. They don't really know quite how to figure that out. And that's kind of our job, but they hear and they see, with everything else that's going out in society, that this information is out there, and Now it's just a tech problem to go build the right plumbing to kind of serve the data quickly. So, but that piece and then layering kind of ML on top of that to do it in real time is probably, again, the next kind of big frontier that keeps me up at night and I find pretty interesting to work on.
Perfect. Thank you, Jim. Vaidya, over to you.
Yeah. So I would think the first job on hand is kind of integrating seamlessly the data across the life sciences value chain. While we are at it, LSO organizations are also kind of negotiating risk sharing contracts with the payers and providers. Especially when it is the focus is shifting from pills to patients. The patient outcomes what will drive businesses going forward. So in such a case, the data integration across the relevant stakeholders, the sophisticated platform that can enable the crunching of the humongous data and infusement of AI and ML. When I say AI and ML, there is going to be a very typical way of how AI ML will kind of be infused in this space. The kind of volumes of data, it's not going to be humanly possible to be able to manually do even an exploratory data analysis, identify your data clusters, to be curating those data and feeding your engines, models or algorithms. So it's going to be completely taken over by auto ML, right from exploratory data analysis all the way to variable identification, variable reduction, um, identification of models, iterating models, and also not to forget the complexities in operationalizing a model. It's only as good as a model that can yield results only when you operationalize. So iterate, operationalize, and monitor through sophisticated MLOps, auto MLOps, if I may say. So these are the trends that will kind of kick in as we move forward, in the space. And I also have one wish list. If all of us can come together, we already crashed the lead time of vaccine production and testing from years to months. I only hope with viruses mutating, we only crash it to days, from months. I'm sure that will also happen.
Awesome. Thank you, Vaidya. Parthaban, Prasad, anything to add there?
Not from my side, James.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Jim, Jesse, Srini, Vaidya, Prasad, Parthaban. Thank you all for your participation in the session today. We don't have any further questions coming in for the crowd, but I'd like to thank everyone in the audience for joining us today on behalf of Hexaware, Snowflake, and IQVIA. We really do appreciate your participation. We're happy to talk about any of these topics in more detail with you. Please reach out to us here at Hexaware. We're happy to coordinate introductions to our partners here at both Snowflake and IQVIA as well. But thank you so much for your time. We hope you found this session beneficial, and we look forward to the next time. Good luck there out in the data world.
Thanks, James. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, James.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.